Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Mark.
Hi.
Morning, just letting everyone in. If you just bear with me here a minute.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi.
Anyone that's in the participant list and getting a notification that you've been promoted to be a panelist, you're welcome to accept that or deny it. If you deny it, you'll just stay in the participant pool and you'll be able to listen, but not actively participate without raising your hand. So. Get started in just a minute. We currently have, looks like 9 people total. Morning.
Hi.
Mindy. Hi, baby.
I'm not seeing a chat function, so I'll just offer that. Hi, Vivian. First of all, I'm CJ with the Conway School. I may have to cancel out my video because my feed might not be real strong. So know that I'm here and listening. Thanks.
Just gonna give it another minute. There's still some people coming in to the waiting room.
May I ask if there's a way to join Zoom without a password, without pre-registration?
It shouldn't require pre-registration. There is, I believe, a password in the invite. Is there someone trying to join that's unable to?
I'm trying to join. I got the notice from Eileen Mooney's, newsletters, and that's the only place I saw it. So when I try to join, it asks me for my email and my passcode.
Okay, let me just bear with me here. I can probably give you that information if you'd like to join us with your computer. Passcode is 664477.
Yeah, I tried that. It doesn't work with it's asking for my email and my passcode. And if I put my email and that in, it doesn't work. I'm okay on the phone. It's okay. It'd be lovely to see, but
Okay.
I'm okay on the phone.
That may be a Zoom passcode for your account rather than for this.
No, I'm on Zoom all the time. It isn't. It's related to this call.
Okay.
Mark,
For
if I,
this meeting.
Mark, if I may, the link
Please.
that I used that is on, it looks like it's on the website, worked just fine. It was even like a PDF that I pulled up and clicked on the link and I didn't have to do a password or anything to hop right on. So maybe that's an option.
When they
Which
do ask for the
website?
password, they are asking for your personal Zoom password, which is what I put in to get in the meeting.
Try that.
Okay.
Otherwise, which website did you find it on?
Probably the town's website.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. Thank you very much.
It's town of
Thank
GB.
you also for doing this. It's such an important topic.
Sure, thank you for joining. Okay, let's get started this morning. I know everyone has a busy schedule. It's a little after 10. I'll continue to keep an eye on the participant pool and let people in as they join. There are 3 others in the pool that we're not seeing, but anyway, let's get started. So my speaker this morning is Vivian Orlowski, and in the next few weeks we'll be installing, some of you may have already heard through a press release, we'll be installing pollinator friendly native plants along Main Street. And you're seeing that work starting now with the cleaning out of the beds, the removal of the plants that have been in there for 7, 8 years or more now. The trees downtown are being pruned, so you're probably seeing a lot of action already. But this is a project that's part of the Great Barrington Pollinator Action Plan. So I invited Vivian Orlowski, who's our Agricultural Commission Chair, here this morning to talk more about that, because the commission played a lead role in helping with this plan, and she's here to give us a little more information on what will be happening in the next couple of weeks and why. So Vivian, do you want to get us started, or do you have anything you want to lead with, or should I jump right into some questions for you?
You can jump right into questions. Let me just say first, before I answer it, that I want to say how much I appreciate your inviting me today. And I also want to thank DPW Superintendent Sean Van Dusen, who's provided outstanding leadership in implementing pollinator-friendly practices on town property. Developing and implementing the Great Barrington Pollinator Action Plan has been a team effort involving Assistant Town Manager and Director of Planning Chris Rembold, along with other town staff and committees, and of course, the current and former members of the Agricultural Commission who've been involved and who are continuing to be involved. So now I'll tackle your first question if you want to ask it.
Sure. And thanks again, Vivian, for joining us this morning. So along with providing attractive downtown landscaping, which of course is the real goal here, and I know this is something that is overdue and much needed downtown, we've to date just allowed store owners to plant plants randomly. It hasn't really been consistent, and the goal here is to make that look of downtown a little more consistent and in line with our pollinator action plan. So why is this important to the town, Vivian, and why is it important to support pollinators?
Mark, let's start with the basics. Pollinators transfer pollen between plants, enabling the plants to reproduce. Did you know that about 1/3 of the food we eat depends on pollinators? For example, how many of us would miss not having blueberries, strawberries, cranberries, apples, pears, pumpkins, squash, and dozens of other fruits, vegetables, herbs, seeds, and nuts? Well, they all depend upon pollinators. Furthermore, how many people realize that in the big picture, about 3/4 of all flowering plants on Earth rely on pollinators to reproduce? Bees, butterflies, birds, and other pollinators are vital for our entire ecosystem. They provide essential services for valued crops and contribute to our agricultural economy, both nationally and here locally and regionally. So the bottom line is that bees and other pollinators are really needed for human survival. Albert Einstein is supposedly observed, and I quote, "If the bee disappeared off the surface of the globe, then man would have only 4 years of life left. No more bees, no more pollination, no more plants, no more animals, no more man," end quote. So that's a pretty dramatic prediction, but it is a real threat since many bees and other pollinators are becoming extinct for various reasons: loss of habitat, unreliable food sources, unpredictable weather shifts, proliferation of diseases, and the widespread use of pesticides. Especially toxic to pollinators are the newer systemic pesticides based on nicotine. They're called neonicotinoids, or neonics for short, and they impact the entire plant. Sometimes the seeds are actually coated with them, and then the plant grows with the neonicotinoids throughout their whole structure. And then they stay in the soil and water for a long time, so they have a lasting impact. They kill all the bugs, including the good insects like bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. Often it's a delayed effect. The bee doesn't just keel over after it goes to a flower that's with a plant that has neonicotinoids in it. They get disoriented, can't find home, and then if they do get home, they're in a weakened condition and they can't resist other infections or parasites. And recent research indicates connection between neonicotinoids' effect on pollinators and also having impact directly on the human nervous system, as we're exposed to them in the plants we eat or in the air or soil or water. So bees are the most important pollinators. While honeybees produce honey and pollinate some crops, a lot of the pollination heavy lifting, so to speak, is done by less publicized native bees. There are about 4,000 different native bee species in the US, and Massachusetts is home to about 400 of these bee species. Unfortunately, some of these native bees are among the most endangered species, and they often depend on native plants. So the Great Barrington Pollinator Action Plan shows how to create a pathway or a corridor through the center of town where it would otherwise be what could be called a food desert for pollinators. Landscape designer Devin Arnold, who previously was a member of the Agricultural Commission, created a plan to include native plants in 81 planters along Main Street. This covers, as I understand it, about 1/5 of an acre in total land. They're small plots, but there are a lot of them. And the planting, as you said, Mark, will take place over the next few weeks. Sean Van Duzen's Department of Public Works is in charge of supervising that. And then we'll see the plants in bloom next spring. By the way, Devin Arnold was going to try and call in from the field for a few minutes. So if you or anyone else has a specific question about the design that he drew up for the plantings, now would be a good time to take a short break and connect to Devin. I don't know if he's there. Can you check on the callers?
I'm here, Mindy. I'm right here.
Okay, great. So if there are any questions about specifically about the design that's going to be implemented in the next few weeks, now would be a good time to ask, because I think Devin has to get back to the field in a few minutes, and he might not be available in 10 minutes or so when we finish, unless you can stay on for a little while, Devin.
A little bit. So I'm actually in the middle of a planting at the moment. So I don't have a huge amount of time, but certainly a chunk for you all if you have questions.
Is there any key observation that you'd like to make about the design, about the types of plants you've chosen, for example, that you could tell participants?
So essentially the design is broken down into kind of 4 different sub-designs. The planters are fairly variable as far as size and positioning on the surface. So some of them are above the grade of the sidewalk and some of them are below the grade of the sidewalk. So in order to kind of deal with that variation in conditions, the designs call for the ones where the planter is below grade to be largely plants that are adapted to wetter and partially waterlogged and soggy conditions, whereas the ones that are above grade and never receive any superficial runoff from the street are all more plants that thrive in, very dry, low moisture environments. Everything is selected to be tolerant to salt. Everything is designed to have a contiguous bloom period from essentially early to mid-April through November. So it should be very exciting. Should be beautiful. The pollinators should love it. Very excited for it.
Yeah, the season spanning of your choices for the planting is so vital. That will not only for the beauty of downtown, but also so that the pollinators don't become accustomed, let's say, earlier in the season to being able to forage along Main Street and then suddenly have a gap. So that's great. Thank you, Devin. Are there any questions before Mark goes on to the next question? Any question from the participants or from Mark?
Super quick that one of the other big things we tried to focus on was providing plants that not only just provide pollen and nectar resources, but also provide overwintering sites and habitat. A number of the species that we're doing are host plants for a number of important Lepidoptera species and other things. So we're not only giving them a place to feed, but also a safe place in theory to overwinter and kind of lay their eggs and continue the generation.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, Devin, because people might wonder why things are not trimmed back over the winter, to make it look quote unquote neat. But the stalks that are there really do provide a home for the next generation of the pollinators. So thank you for explaining that. That's important for people to understand, and not just to think that the town is slacking on cleaning up the landscaping. So, and any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, Mark, do you have more questions?
I do. Could you just talk about the Agricultural Commission and how you've helped advance the town's pollinator protection activities?
Well, because the pollinator crisis that we just discussed would undermine our farms, gardens, and food supply, in 2016, the Agricultural Commission introduced the first town meeting resolution in all of New England to declare Great Barrington a pollinator-friendly community. The goal was to encourage awareness, education, and voluntary action in support of pollinators. This was not a law. There was no enforcement. The town meeting enthusiastically approved this resolution. And after that, the Agricultural Commission engaged the Conway School of Sustainable Landscape Planning and Design to help us determine specific ways the town could implement low cost and low maintenance pollinator-friendly measures on town property. The result was the Great Barrington Pollinator Action Plan. It's 89 pages long. I have a physical copy here, which is also available in Mason and Ramsdale Library. The free PDF of this is available online at the Agricultural Commission's webpage, as is the resolution from town meeting in 2016, which is just a one-page resolution. And the Conway School plan that we worked on with us, we brought in people from town staff, from community organizations, from the business community, from the larger region. And it was to encourage not only use of, not to encourage, to actually lay out what could be done on town-owned property, and then to encourage similar measures by local businesses, nonprofit organizations, and residents. And it includes suggestions for public buildings, such as the Mason Library, which already now has a pollinator garden following the plan, and Town Hall, which will have a pollinator garden after all the construction work is completed there in front. But the plan also includes other places that we may not think of to be pollinator friendly, not necessarily with gardens, but with other practices. For example, cemeteries, golf courses, which otherwise may use a tremendous amount of pesticides, schools, other institutions, farms, of course, residences, and trails, such as the extension of the Riverwalk, the current Riverwalk and its extension, streetscapes and parking lots, and roadside management. Some of the measures suggested in the Pollinator Action Plan may involve a modest initial investment, like the Main Street plantings, but they will reap long-term savings. Another example is a no-cost measure where we can mow less frequently and allow lawns to grow up to 3 inches. This saves money and reduces greenhouse gas emissions from gas-powered lawnmowers. Creating resilient native plant communities means healthier plants able to resist insect pests. And this makes it easier to avoid costly and polluting pesticides that go into our water, soil, and food. Superintendent of Public Works, Sean Van Dusen, took part in all the community forums that the AgCom organized with the graduate student team from the Conway School. And the DPW has institutionalized many pollinator-friendly practices in their standard operating procedures and contracts concerning town properties. For example, no use of pesticides or insecticides by the DPW, and limited roadside mowing, only mowing what's needed for safety and visibility. Other town departments and committees involved in pollinator-friendly practices include the Planning Board, which incorporated pollinator planting requirements in commercial solar installations on farms. Because just think of it, these farms had things growing, plants growing there, and then the installations come through and it creates another food desert for pollinators. But we work with the Planning Board to suggest specific plantings that could be done around and throughout the solar installations without blocking the sun. And Great Barrington Libraries also cooperated with the Agricultural Commission to purchase and make available books and videos about pollinators for adults and children. And there's also a pollinator garden, as I mentioned, right in front of the library. The Tree Committee, prior to the pandemic, included pollinator themes in one of their public Arbor Day events. And then community organizations such as Riverwalk, Great Barrington Farmers Market, and the Lake Mansfield Alliance have really stepped up enthusiastically and sponsored pollinator-friendly events and activities. So your next question, Mark?
Sure, thank you, Vivian. So I like to think of Great Barrington as a leader in many ways. You know, our polystyrene ban back in the early 1990s was very, very early for most communities. Our water bottle ban recently, our plastic bag ban. And I'm curious to hear from you, Vivian, how do you see this spreading to other communities? Do you think this will be another one of those model programs that will be adopted by neighboring towns?
Well, that seems to have already been taking place since a town meeting passed the pollinator-friendly community resolution in 2016. Many towns across the state have taken similar steps. Our Agricultural Commission worked closely with the Williamstown pollinator advocates to pass their resolution in 2017. In the Berkshires, Egremont and North Adams also took positive similar steps for their municipalities. And then in the Pioneer Valley, Northampton has become a leader in the field. So this is already underway, and it's certainly gone beyond our initial efforts. But the Great Barrington Pollinator Action Plan, developed by the Conway School, along with the Ag Commission and other town bodies, has had even more widespread influence way beyond our town. For example, Friends of the Earth, the national nonprofit, distributed the link to the Great Barrington Pollinator Action Plan, available for free on our town website, to more than 200 towns and cities throughout the country, because those towns and cities were contacting Friends of the Earth, which has been very proactive in pollinator issues, to ask, well, what can we do in specific? And they don't have this national organization doesn't have the detailed response, so they referred all these other places to our plan. And in the state legislature, for example, our Representative Smitty Pignatelli, back when he chaired the Joint Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture, helped to get a unanimous vote in his committee for an act to protect Massachusetts pollinators. More regionally, the Housatonic Heritage, which is the Upper Housatonic Valley National Heritage Area, is a partner of the National Park Service. And they were inspired by the Great Barrington Pollinator Action Plan to join with other national heritage areas nationwide on a project called Operation Pollination. And they cover most of the Berkshires from Pittsfield, a little bit north of Pittsfield on south, and then Northwest Connecticut. And in 2018, the Center for Food Studies at Bard College at Simon's Rock focused their annual Think Food Conference on pollinators. The keynote speaker was Cornell professor Thomas Seeley, the author of a book called Honey Bee Democracy. His research showed how honeybees communicated with each other to help make decisions for the entire hive. And this conference attracted participants from throughout Western Massachusetts and nearby New York State. So they helped pollinate the ideas in our Pollinator Action Plan. And I believe Devin was a speaker there, and I was definitely involved in the planning and implementation of the conference. And one of the Think Food Conference participants about pollinators was cinematographer Peter Nelson, who then produced and directed a film called The Pollinators, quote unquote. In early 2020, before the pandemic, a Berkshire International Film Festival sponsored a showing of The Pollinators, along with a panel discussion in which I took part. At that time, I was also exploring the possibility with the Berkshire Hills Regional School District Superintendent Peter Dillon about bringing the Pollinators film and an accompanying curriculum to the middle and high schools, and along with an in-person presentation by producer-director Peter Nelson, who lives in nearby New York State. Unfortunately, the pandemic sidelined that project. But the Great Barrington Agricultural Commission this past year became a founding member of a new statewide network called the Massachusetts Pollinator Network that was organized by the Northeast Organic Farming Association. And if you go to the NOFA, N-O-F-A, mass.org website, or just Google Massachusetts Pollinator Network, you can find information on their monthly meetings and on monthly presentations by other communities who are active in pollinator protection. And these are all free resources that they're offering. So that's another way our efforts have helped spread.
Great, thanks, Vivian. It looks like Allison has her hand up. Do you have a question, Allison?
Hey, Mark. Hi, everyone. Yes, I do. Thanks for having this. I'm sort of just stunned at the amount of work that has been done on this effort. And thank you. I just think it's phenomenal, and something that I'm so thrilled that is becoming above board, given that we're opening a public park. And I believe, and I'm checking with our wetlands person, that we've planted pollinators in the compensatory water storage areas of our public park. And so we can kind of join your map of pollinators. And I think it would be so interesting if there was an effort to kind of put a map out about the town's varying locations of where people can find these amazing. And because I feel like there's a misinterpretation sometimes, just having worked at the 100 Bridge Street site, that when people see something growing, the assumption it's a weed, and why is it there, and shouldn't it be cut? And so a map on how to educate people about the value of those areas might really go a very long way as to helping support this. So I just wanted to offer that.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Is that something you see the Ag Commission potentially taking on, mapping out these areas where pollinator gardens exist?
We can certainly discuss how to do that and also how to collaborate maybe with others in the town committee and.
Great. So my next question for you, Vivian, is what new opportunities have arisen for the town because of our leadership here in pollinator plants?
Well, the collaboration with the Conway School of Sustainable Landscape Planning and Design on the pollinator plan was so successful, and as you heard, had such impact, which is something that is important for them and their students. There was a graduate student program. They contacted us about a grant opportunity with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And under the guidance of Chris Rambold and the Planning Department, the Agricultural Commission worked with CJ Lammers, representing the Conway School, and she's also, I believe, on a participant in earlier on. I saw her in this forum. And anyhow, we worked on this grant and we were successful. We received a grant for a project that's called Growing Better Great Barrington, a food system plan for climate resilience, environmental sustainability, and community food security. It's an ambitious plan and it will get underway with a team of graduate students from the Conway School who work very closely every week with the faculty at the Conway School. So we get the benefit of all the faculty wisdom and experience, plus the energy and dedication of the graduate student team. And they're going to start working with us in early January. And at that time, under normal circumstances, we would hold a community forum like we did in Town Hall for the pollinator plan. But due to COVID circumstances, it's probably more likely that we're going to do a Zoom meeting and also probably some type of survey outreach to reach people who may not have heard about or have access to the Zoom meeting. So we are going to be reaching out to the community, and I certainly hope that everybody who's on this call will be interested in helping to guide this new plan, which is very ambitious. We're seeking to lower greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the food miles that are involved in bringing food. In many cases, over 1,500 miles is the average distance that our food comes from. And also the productivity and resilience of the soil that's used for growing food on our farms, and also to encourage community gardening and community efforts, both organized and also in separate, by separate individuals at their residences. And that will also help advance food security and safe access to food in emergencies. And we want to increase the number of green jobs involved locally in producing food locally and regionally, and enhance the potential for integrating more diverse and biodiverse land uses. Because in order to prepare for climate change and be more resilient in producing food, probably involves exploration of new crop varieties and things like that can deal with the weather extremes and climate disruption that we've started to experience, but we're expecting a lot more, and that's what people are meeting about in Glasgow. So this is going to tie in with a larger theme of climate resilience, and also with the very important theme of community food security, because as we see now, prices are rising for food. It's becoming more expensive. And also we're facing supply chain bottlenecks. And because a lot of our food, and certainly processed food, comes from abroad. And the more we can do locally to produce our food, both commercially on farms and also individually in the community, will make us a more resilient town and be better for our people of Great Barrington and surrounding areas that depend on us.
CJ, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I am here, Vivian. So great to hear about all the successes of the pollinator plan. And I want to thank Devin for all his hard work on this. I know he's been at this from the beginning. And as we step out to the next logical step, right, that pollinators are good and, you know, helping people make the connection with pollinators are necessary, not just good. And linking it to the food system is really an exciting way to continue that work. I also wanted to mention one quick thing that I think is going to be really interesting and provide some good cross-pollination, if you will, is we're also doing a food system study for the city of Holyoke. So it'll be 2 separate teams of 2 to 3 students. We'll see how the numbers work out. And so we'll have kind of an urban view of food systems and a more rural view of food systems. And frankly, some connection of regionally how they're linked. So I think that's going to be a really exciting part of this coming semester. And if folks that are on the call and other folks were, Vivian is working on a stakeholder list and we'll be reaching out before January to just kind of give you an overview of what we can do with the project. Super excited to be working with you again, Vivian. Thank you.
Thank you, CJ.
Okay, so thank you again, Vivian. I think I just want to conclude this by asking anyone that's interested in learning more about this to visit the town's website. It's www.townofgb.org. The Agricultural Commission page has information there. And I also wanted to take an opportunity to just mention that there are still two vacancies. Is that right, Vivian, on the Agricultural Commission?
Oh, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, well, one of the things that the Pollinator Action Plan has done is attract a new member who I understand is going to be applying either today or tomorrow. And if possible, would hope to get on the select board agenda for review next week, because the Agricultural Commission is going to meet later in November, and we'd love to have her with us when we take the next steps in preparing for the Growing Better Great Barrington activities that CJ mentioned.
Great.
But just to finish, yeah, so we have one person applying. I don't know if she's applying for there's an alternate position and there's a full member position. Both terms are 3-year terms to 2024. And I don't know which one she's applying for, but certainly we treat our alternate members as full participants, and usually we work things out before we even vote. So voting is usually for formality once we get to that point. And so if anybody else is interested in joining the Ag Commission in the one vacant spot that will be available after this person hopefully joins, we'd be delighted to entertain that. And I guess they should contact your office with an application. Is that correct, Mark?
That's correct. They can contact my office. In order for us to have this on the agenda for the 8th, I would have to have it by tomorrow morning.
Okay.
We meet again on the 22nd. So if we miss a few weeks, we'll catch it at the next one. But
Sure.
that's great. And anyone else interested, just reach out to my office. We'd love to bring you on board. Looks like Andrea has her hand up. You want to open your mic, Andrea?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for this forum. I'm a Great Barrington resident and a beekeeper, and I'm just so thrilled and so grateful that this is happening. It's so important. I had 2 quick questions. One is, when do you think we might see a change in the policy on the roadside mowing?
Vivian, do you have any background information on that? My understanding is that roadside mowing is already limited to necessary areas.
Maybe there's a difference in interpretation of what is important for safety and visibility, but just as a, as a resident, it feels like there's just a lot of clear cutting happening along the roadsides, which is taking down daylilies and lots of and even little saplings on dirt roads that are great carbon sequesters. So I don't know, maybe someone could take a peek at that. I'm not sure. Or I could become more, active if that would be helpful in that regard. But the second question is about pesticide use, private pesticide use by commercial gardeners in town. And I wonder how you think about that and if there's any way to approach that both for pollinators and also toxicity to water table.
Vivian, you want to cover that?
Yeah, as I said about the resolution and what we're trying to do with the pollinator action plan is show by positive example. And I certainly will look into, first of all, the questions you raised about mowing. Do I know you? I know your first name, but I know several people with that.
Hi, Vivian. We've intersected by email sometimes, and I'm just such a great supporter of your work. I'm Andrea Ponarides. I live on Seekonk Road.
Okay.
You probably have my email in your list, but I'll shoot you an email. And if you want to take this offline, if there's any way I can be helpful, I'd love to. And, I don't know what the appetite is or the politics of banning private use of pesticides, but it's 2021. We know what the consequences are. So I'm all for any creative efforts to, do the sensible thing.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Yes, I do have your email, and I think you have mine. And if you could send me information that I can forward to Sean Van Dusen about the mowing. In terms of private use, as a town, we can't control that. We can control what we do with town resources and on town property, and hopefully set an example to show that we can have attractive landscaping without needing to endanger our environment and our own health, not to speak of pollinator health.
Yeah.
There have been attempts, I think, at the state level. Certainly, we can look further afield. The European Union several years ago banned neonicotinoid pesticides. There are different kinds of pesticides.
Yes.
Some are more benign. For example, some organic gardeners do use certain pesticides. What we could do, and I believe it's in the Pollinator Action Plan, I have to check, I don't remember all the details, it's 89 pages. What we can do is try to ask, put up a notice asking people who do use pesticides on their property to check with their neighbors and to make sure that it wouldn't affect the health or well-being of their neighbors, their children, their pets, and their pollinators. The neighbors may be growing native plants and pollinator gardens, and then the wind can bring this drift of the pesticides over. So I think the idea would be to be a good neighbor and for your own sake to try to limit the use. It's an interesting statistic that while farmers have been kind of caught up in many cases on this cycle of using genetically modified seeds, and then they require the application of certain pesticides and herbicides, farmers are running businesses and they try to minimize their costs, and also they try to minimize their exposure. They're educated about this. So it's really the private land use and the private land care professionals who may tend to go overboard. Statistically, I think I understand that it's a much greater use nationally based on sales from retail outlets for pesticides by this individual use, and that includes businesses and municipalities. But it's much greater use than on farms. And we're also a right to farm community. So that gives the farmers the protection to do whatever they need to earn a living. And the way we'd like to work with them in the Growing Better Great Barrington plan is to come up with ways that they can transition to healthier ways of farming. But we are not about imposing any limits. And the same would be true for these other uses. It's a question of education and showing that we don't really need to use the pesticides. There are other things that work, and our concept of what our landscape should look like need to be adjusted in order to be resilient for the climate disruption that we're going to be increasingly facing.
Thank you very much. I feel like the more your work is publicized and people really understand it, the more we may have action on that front. For instance, a neighbor here has the little yellow flags where the gardener puts up after they apply pesticide. And I got in a conversation with her, just kind of in a friendly way, saying, do you know what that means? She said, oh no, the gardener just puts that up. They don't really use pesticides here. And I said, but they do, because that's what that says. And she said she really didn't know that. She was going to call. She did call. Indeed, they do use pesticides, and she's asked them to find another option. So it could be people using commercial gardeners really, the person comes in, they fix the yard, they leave. They may not really understand what's being used on their property. And your work could help, ask them, do you know what's being used on your property and what happens to pollinators? Take a peek. There are other alternatives.
Yeah, well, hopefully the pollinator planting on Main Street will give people a view of how to be ecologically resilient and healthy while providing an attractive landscape. And I think people need to see that, because on the other side, we have the advertising from the companies who benefit from sales of these pesticides and herbicides, and they are presenting a picture of lawns looking like living room carpets or golf courses or whatever. So people think that they need to do that in order to have an attractive surroundings. And so it really is a question of new examples, new imaging, plus education. And we've reached out to the school committee in terms of their planning for Monument Mountain Next Steps. This was before the pandemic. The Ag Commission did a presentation, and it included Devin Arnold, and it included local farmer Jen Salinetti. And we talked about ways that the campus of the school could be part of the education, and not just a backdrop for a building, which a few plantings were thrown in. And there seemed to be a lot of receptivity to that, and it was included in their final report and recommendations. However, the pandemic interrupted that, and we really need to follow up with them, because if people, it would be another place if people frequent and see what's going on, and if they could see a landscape that is attractive and pleasant, but also ecologically healthy and personally healthy for them and their kids, then that's how we're going to make progress. But it is a process of showing by example and education. We're not going to try to do local enforcement.
I understand. Thank you so much for this forum and for your great work.
Sure, thanks for the questions. We're closing in on 11 here, so I'd like to conclude this conversation soon, but I see some hands up. Robin, you were up first. You're muted, Robin.
Sorry, first, thank you, Vivian, for your great work. I second what everyone else is saying. It's certainly a wonderful project that you've undertaken. This question is for you though, Mark. Have we coordinated in any way, or can we coordinate with Chris Horton, who is the county person that, I guess his title is more mosquito control, but it's pest control in general. And see what kinds of chemicals and what changes in those chemicals. I know I've had a relationship with him as a homeowner for the last 6 years, and he does work on both mosquito control and tick control. And to the question earlier about the mowing on the side of the lawn, I don't want to play devil's advocate on the side of the road. I don't want to play devil's advocate, but I do just want to point out something in an article that I read recently, that not only is it sometimes an issue of safety and visibility for oncoming traffic, it also protects pedestrians walking on the roads from brushing against the foliage in terms of ticks. And it also helps manage the tick population, which is, of course, been very bad and is increasingly worse the wetter it gets. So there are those two sides to the story, but I would welcome having Chris's input in this whole process, Chris Wharton. So that was my first sort of question and comment. Second, off topic, Mark, I see that Chris is not on this call, but I want to know, there's work being done by HOP right now to prune the trees on Main Street. We have two pretty much dead trees in front of our store, and 288 Main Street, and they're both choke cherries. And I spoke to HOP. They admitted that they are not thriving. They're the absence of thriving. Is there some formal means of submitting a letter, and please tell me to whom, so that we can be in line to get those trees replaced?
I would say send an email over to me or to Sean directly. We do have a small budget for tree replacements in town. I don't know where that is mid-fiscal year, but if there's capacity there, that's something we could address, or we could address it in the spring when we start our new fiscal year. So please just send us an email and we'll put it on our radar. Hop's now pruning all the trees on Main Street, and they may come back to us with a report on their recommendations for pruning or replacing some trees as well. So, but just give us an email. That'll get the conversation started.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Robin. Betsy.
Just a quick thing. So I think pretty much anybody that lives in this area, when listening to this conversation, would be very appreciative of all the work that's being done, and totally agree that they would love to support the action. The thing I would stress, and maybe it's already being done and I'm just not aware of it, is if there was some very simple ways for people to follow what's happening. In the conversation you just had about pesticides, you're right. So many people don't really understand the impact, and or don't know what their gardener's doing or their landscape person's doing. So if there was just the simplest, almost like even little pictures, with a circle with an X through it, don't use this, instead use this, and then maybe up top just some explanatory about how to save our bee population. So if it was something quick that somebody could look at, rather than an 89-page plan, which you're going to lose somebody the first page, if there was something quick that they could refer to and it just kind of stuck in their mind, like, oh yeah, I shouldn't plant this plant, I really should plant this plant. Everybody's going to do it this spring. They're going to reconfigure their gardens and shape things up, and if they have something quick, a reference quick in mind, it could be way more beneficial to the people that aren't going to get in depth like you guys are, but what they still want to help.
Maybe something as simple as identifying the plants in the garden, so that if someone is
that
attracted by a plant,
that would be fabulous if there was some little placard or whatever.
That would be great.
Thank you, Betsy.
Jim, go ahead. You're up next.
As you try and incentivize, you were talking about targeting the commercial landscapers and trying to incentivize rather than regulate, which I think is a good approach. Something similar happened. I'm an architect. Something similar has been happening for the past decade or two with architecture and energy use and building materials. And they've targeted architects as thought leaders. And it's been, I think, pretty successful. And I think as a result, we've seen a lot of changes in the building code and much better and more energy efficient buildings that are much healthier on the inside for residents. And so I think you should focus on the landscapers, but also the landscape architects, and then also the nurseries where the plants are sold. And I think that all this stuff, because the lesson for me, the small businessman, the architect, is that it's actually good for my business to be able to tell my client that I'm giving them a healthier house that is more energy efficient. And, if the benefits to the world aren't enough for them, there are benefits to them personally. And, it doesn't resonate with every client, but it does resonate with many. And there's ways to ramp it up and ramp it down. So I think, if you can get the landscape architects, and I bet they're not going to be a hard sell, they're probably doing it already. They can be your public face, and same with the nurseries. And if there was a plant, and this is an excellent pollinator, there's a symbol at the nursery, like Windy Hill, or that would get people just sort of naturally that participating in the program.
Thank you. Great idea.
Thanks, Jim. So I'd like to real quickly, since we're only a few minutes from 11 o'clock, cover a few updates, and then we'll just open it up to questions, comments from the group. So I'll run through these really quickly, but you've probably noticed several construction projects happening in town. And I just wanted to touch on some of those quickly, because you're probably looking for some information on when they'll conclude, and how much longer they'll be disrupting parking and traffic and things like that. So the first thing I wanted to mention is the northern section of Main Street between the Cotter Street Bridge and the Red Bridge. We've started to install or paint parking stalls in that section. That's traditionally hasn't been a parking area in the past, and we're trying to encourage this area because in light of the parking lot project here that failed at town meeting this year, we're looking for alternatives to provide downtown parking and open up some parking in our core business district. So I wanted to just let everyone know that there are, at the moment, about 20 new parking stalls down on that stretch, and about 40 more will be painted and signed soon. And the idea is that there'll be long-term parking spots. So they'll be open all day for employees, retailers, restaurant owners, or even customers that just want to park for a long period of time without risking having their car ticketed every 2 hours or 4 hours. So that's pretty exciting. We, on Monday night, talked a little bit more about the federal COVID stimulus money, the ARPA funding. So we have a survey on our website now, and I just wanted to encourage everyone, if they have a minute, to participate. I think it takes about 3 minutes to complete the survey. It's 11 questions, and we're just looking for ways to hear from residents here in Great Barrington how we should spend this $2 million. And of course, it does need to fall into one of the 5 categories, and that's very clearly stated on the survey. So you'll know what categories are allowable and which ones aren't. We have English and Spanish versions available. And we also have paper copies. So if anyone would like a paper copy, or if you know an organization that would prefer paper copies, we'd be happy to share those. We're leaving some at the libraries, at the senior center, the food bank, and just doing our best to get those out there. On day one, I think we received over 80 responses. So I'm really hoping to gather quite a bit of information from folks, and then we'll develop a recommendation to the select board based on the results of those surveys and the feedback we heard on Monday. The Taconic parking lot, you've probably noticed, is making significant progress. You're going to start to see the paving crews arrive later this week. Bridge and Bentley right now are being paved today. And then once they're wrapped up there, they'll move equipment up to the Taconic lot and start parking there. So that's really exciting to see those projects closing up now, especially as it's getting colder. Just wanted to, I guess timeline wise, before I move on from that one, everything that I'm talking about right now for fall projects should be concluded by Thanksgiving. So the Taconic Wall and Steps project, if you've driven by there recently, is coming along, looking really great over there. Nice to have that project underway, and hoping to wrap that up by Thanksgiving as well. You're going to start to see some work over on Rossiter and Elm, or Elm Court, I should say, not Elm Street, drainage, paving, and then the same up on Fairview Terrace off of Stockbridge Road. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the Olympian Meadows River Walk extension will also get started this fall. So lots and lots of things happening around town in addition to the downtown trees and gardens. So all very exciting stuff. So that said, I'll just open it up now. Does anyone have a question or a comment? No. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining me this morning, and thank you, Vivian, for sharing, all your plans and all this great information on our pollinator action plan. And I'm really looking forward to seeing those plants be installed over the next couple of weeks, and we'll see what happens in the spring. So thank you all for coming. Take care.
Bye-bye.